Hello, conscious investor, and welcome back. I'm your host, Julie Hawley. For over 4 years, I've paired my background in real estate investing, education, and coaching to create powerful content for you each week. This podcast is where we take a holistic approach to investing by focusing on 3 ingredients to a life of personal freedom: health, mindset, and wealth. We'll talk about everything from passive investing through syndication and how to use your retirement accounts to boost your investing, to mineral balancing and gut-brain health, and into topics that cultivate your inner strength and resilience so you can thrive regardless of any of life's current events. And yes, those are all episodes currently available and linked in the show notes below. Join me each Monday for a mindset episode and later in the week for an interview with expert investors and health professionals so that you can experience your greatest health, strongest mindset, and build the wisest wealth.
Jay, so excited to finally have you here on The Conscious Investor. Welcome.
Thank you. I've been wondering why you haven't invited me sooner, but thank you for having me.
You know, you have this, you were on this whole other tier, this whole other echelon of coolness and smarts and just awesomeness that I was like, okay, I got to get at least 500 episodes in before I invite Jay on the show.
Well, you and I sat in a mastermind together for several days last year, was it? About a year ago. And ever since then, I've been very excited about coming on the show. So thank you for finally having me.
I'm so glad that we finally pulled this off and pulled it together. You and I are both talkers, and I cannot even wait to get into conversation with you, because one of the things that I was so endearing when we were in that mastermind setting was just like, you're so freaking smart, but you're not the smart that is disassociated from everyone in the room type smart, right? And like, you're able to take such high level concepts and to like make them tangible to the world around you. And I absolutely appreciate that so much. And you understand a lot of elements and a lot of nuances that I don't understand, or that I'm always like, okay, I have to front load. I've got to constantly be learning. And I feel like it's just like, you're the wellspring. I feel like you're just the life giver of that. So I'm so grateful to have
Well,
you.
I appreciate that, but the reality is that I'm just older than you are. I'm old. And so all the things that you're doing, learning, is the stuff that I've been doing for probably a decade or two longer than you have. And so I like to say I seem smart because I remember how dumb I used to be, and so it's really easy. Seriously, I can put myself back in that place where I knew very little, if anything, about anything. And so when I talk to people and can explain things that I have learned and that I do know, I can do a good job of remembering how I wanted to be or needed to be talked to back when I knew nothing. And so for me, it really is. It's just that memory of when I used to be just as ignorant as all the new investors out there that will be exactly where I am in 10 or 20 or 30 years of study.
Gosh. See, conscious investor, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Like, even that ability to have that level of awareness to be able to say like, no, I know how I can talk to myself, my past self, which lends itself perfectly to the question in conscious investor. You know what that question is. Like, all right, Jay, I mean, we're making some assumptions, right? Conscious investor, that we know he does, but let's go ahead and ask the question of all questions. Like, what do you do and how did you get started?
Yeah, so I like to say that I am a business person. I know I mostly focus on real estate these days, but I've made a very conscious effort of learning the business side of real estate as well as the real estate side of real estate. So I come from an engineering background and a business background. So I have an electrical engineering degree and an MBA. I spent about 15 years in corporate America. Spent most of my career at Microsoft. Did some engineering and business stuff there. And in 2008, my wife and I quit our jobs. We got married, and we kind of fell into real estate. It wasn't supposed to be a career for us. It was just something to do when we took a summer off after our corporate jobs before we kind of figured out what it was we wanted to do when we grew up. And so we decided to flip a house, and I knew absolutely nothing about real estate. She knew absolutely nothing about real estate, and I was terrified. And so I asked myself, okay, how am I going to do this if I know nothing about real estate? And what I realized was pretty early on was that if I just treat real estate like a business, and I knew business, if I treat real estate like a business, then I have a head start over a lot of people, even without knowing the real estate side of things. And what I've come to realize over the 15, 16, 17 years that we've been doing this is that real estate really is just another business, no different than if I ran a car dealership or a restaurant or a tech business. It really is the same thing. You need to understand things like reading financial statements and hiring and leadership and cash flow management and dealing with inventory and marketing and sales and dealing with customers and all of these things that are consistent across any business you might be in. Real estate has that as well. And unfortunately, what I see is a lot of people who get into real estate who have this attitude that real estate is not a traditional business and we can take shortcuts. I can learn how to flip houses or buy rentals or whatever I want to do in real estate without learning all that other business stuff that I would have to do if I were going to start a real business, quote unquote. But real estate is a real business. And if you learn the business side of things, you're necessarily going to be a better investor than if you just treat real estate as if it's something different from business or easier than business or just a hobby. And so, if anything, when I think about what I do, I'm a business person that just happens to be in real estate.
I value this response so deeply, and a large part because my background, like my family, is residential real estate sales, which is very different than real estate investing, particularly commercial real estate investing.
Yep.
Black sheep over here. But what's interesting about that is that I never saw that actually run as a business, and it was, transactional. And yeah, they're the clients and the repeats and things like that, but it wasn't super intentional. It wasn't run like a well-oiled business operation. And when I look at real estate agents who are friends, just going on that real estate side of things, on the sales side, I can see the difference day and night between those who run like a business and those who are just like, oh, I am a glorified self-employed person.
Yep.
And it's a day and night difference.
And we see this all the time in this industry. It doesn't matter if you're an investor, if you're a real estate agent, or I think the best example is a contractor. How many of us have worked with contractors who are amazing contractors, but they do a really poor job of running the business side of things? They can't manage their cash flow, so they're constantly out of money. They're not really good at staying on schedule. They show up late or they don't show up at all. They take weeks to give you quotes, and it's not because they're bad at their job. It's they're bad at running the business. They're not business people. And I see the same thing in real estate with investing. Those who come from a background of real estate, those who have been contractors or agents or appraisers or whatever else it is, they get into this business and I think they feel like I'm going to leverage those skills that I have. I'm going to leverage my ability to swing a hammer, or I'm going to leverage my ability to stage a house. I'm going to leverage my ability to do whatever it is in the business, and they're so focused on leveraging that skill that they avoid the more important things, the higher level stuff, the hiring and the delegating and actually managing the business. And I think that's part of the reason why my wife and I were successful early on, because we didn't have those skills. We couldn't leverage our real estate knowledge or our real estate experience. All we had was the business knowledge. And so we were forced to focus on that.
That's amazing. Okay, this really is interesting because I'm like, okay, electrical engineer with an MBA working for corporate America. Like, you're in the engineering wing. How did you develop and grow all of your business acumen? Like, how did that happen?
Hanging around smarter people than I was. And it really, that's the key to everything I do is I try and surround myself with people who are super smart, super experienced, and I'll use the word wise. I don't use that word a lot, but in thinking about it, it really is important. And wisdom is the ability to take the experience and translate that into making good decisions moving forward. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to surround myself with people who have that experience, that knowledge, that wisdom, so that I can kind of take shortcuts. When you have to learn everything from scratch, And there have certainly been things I've had to learn from scratch. It takes a lot longer than when you can surround yourself with people who can help you course correct or help direct you in the right direction, so that you don't make as many mistakes. Obviously, we're all going to make mistakes. Mistakes are great, but if you can cut your number of mistakes in half, you're probably going to cut the time that it takes to get from point A to point B by 10 or 20 fold. And so, really, I'd say the biggest thing that I've done is just surrounding myself with really smart people, and leveraging them and trying to offer them value so that I can get value in return.
I love surrounding myself with smart people. I generally feel like, especially when we were at that mastermind, I was like, I am not qualified to be in this room. I felt so, and I remember calling my husband saying, I'm so in the right room because I don't feel qualified to be in here, and I am learning so much, and this is the best time of my life. Like, it's that nerdtastic where you just go, although I want to be able to contribute and add value, I'm like, well, I can share Jelly Bellies. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know if you remember, I literally had some Jelly Bellies. I'm like, I don't know how I can add value. Because this is such a powerhouse of brain power here.
But the cool thing about that room was, and I think this is another key takeaway, is that nobody in that room, I'm guessing, felt like they were the smartest. Nobody in that room felt like they didn't have anything to learn because there were so many different sets of skills in that room. And you're good at certain things. I'm good at certain things. The other people in the room, they're good at certain things. And it's not a ton of overlap. And so you can learn stuff at the same time that you're teaching. I can learn stuff at the same time that I'm teaching. If everybody in the room is doing the exact same thing, then it becomes a competition. Okay, who's flipped more houses, or who's bought more rentals, or who owns more apartments, or who owns more self-storage. But when everybody has a different set of skills and a different background, everybody can be the teacher as well as the student. And so that's another part of surrounding yourself with smart people, not just smart people, but people who do things that you typically don't, or people that you don't typically surround yourself with, so that you can learn new things without having to compete for who's the best or who's the most successful.
That's so important. I just finished reading. Well, I listened to the book, and it's called "The Magic of Thinking Big." I think it's by Charles Schwartz. I can't remember, and I was gonna pull my phone out and pull up the book. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But it's interesting. It was written in, I believe, the late '50s, and it reads like something from the '50s, but it is timeless truths about caring and conducting yourself in the business world, and just generally, like, in life, and how to create and
Yep.
establish this beautiful life, right? And one of the elements he says is, hey, don't be around all the same people all the time.
Well,
Just to, like, double down on that is like, let's make sure that you were around a variety of different people, because it brings out differences in us. I love that. It's so important.
and it makes it easier for us to add value to their lives, because if they're in a different space than we are, have a different area of expertise than we do, then they can learn from the things that we're really good at as well. And so it gives us the ability not just to take, but to add value as well when you surround yourself with people who are different than you are.
This so insightful. I have so many questions that are probably not the typical questions. But conscious investor, I know that you are thinking this particular question. You've mentioned your wife a couple of times. You and I off air, we're talking about our families. We've been married, for many years. We're just within a couple of years of each other on that. So it's like, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to build life together. You guys, have worked together. That's amazing. So how did that work for you when you first started out in real estate, flipping houses and such? Is it interesting dynamic that many couples cannot execute well? So how did that go?
Yeah, it's tough. And it took us a decade before we kind of figured out the rhythm and figured out how to get it to work. And even after a decade, and we don't work together. I mean, she's kind of decided that she's done with me, and and she'd rather not work with me anymore.
You retired
So
yourself.
well, she's focused on the kids these days. But for a decade, we worked together, and yeah, it's challenging. And at the beginning, we're both very type A personalities. We're both very smart people. We both come from the corporate world, and we're both used to being in charge. We're both used to running teams. We're both used to making decisions and having the final say. And so the first couple of years were really, really tough because every decision it felt like it needed to be a democracy, but a democracy with two people can be very difficult, because while we're both smart people, I like to think, and we have similar corporate backgrounds, we think very differently. She's a marketing type person. She's a creative type. I'm an engineer. I'm very analytical. And so oftentimes she'd have one reaction or one opinion. I'd have a different reaction, a different opinion. If you're going to vote on it, well, you're never going to come to consensus with two people. And so for the first couple of years, every decision was an argument. Every decision was a debate. Every decision took way too long to make. And so things progressed a lot more slowly than they should have. Eventually, we both realized that in the business that we were doing, in the flipping business, there were certain things that she was amazing at that I could recognize that I wasn't. She was great at finding properties and negotiating deals and staging and marketing and selling. Then there were the things that I was really good at that she would be the first to admit that she wasn't. So underwriting and raising capital and dealing with contractors and dealing with the financial statements and the money. And so once we realized that we had all the skills to be a great business person, she had half of them and I had half of them. What we realized was we needed to run this business more like a bigger business. So if you go into any corporate environment, what you see is that there are departments. So I worked at Microsoft forever, and if you go to Microsoft and there are engineers and there are salespeople and there are marketing people, there are QA people and there are product managers, and I mean there's finance people and all different types of people. And the engineers don't try to do the salespeople's job. The marketing people don't try to do the people's jobs. Everybody knows what their role is, and that's what they focus on. And the salespeople have the final decision-making authority when it comes to something sales-related. Engineers have final authority when it comes to something engineering. And so we did the same thing in our business. We realized, okay, she's really good at the acquisitions and the dispositions, so staging and selling. I'm really good at the raising capital and renovations. And so she took her half of the business and she had full autonomy, full authority to make decisions. I took my half of the business. I had full autonomy, full authority to make decisions. And things started to go much more smoothly because she was making great decisions on her half of the business because that was her area of expertise. I was making good decisions on my side of the business because that was my area of expertise. And suddenly our business started working. Not only that, but our relationship started working a whole lot better because we had a whole lot more respect for each other. We weren't fighting over every decision, and we were able to let things go. We were able to say, hey, this is your area of expertise. I trust you whatever you decide, and vice versa.
I love that. And I love how you and your wife processed through it and didn't quit, didn't give up. You persevered through the process and it put you in a whole different position in life. And like
Yep.
it'd be a very different scenario if you were unwilling. I was just mentioning this to a coaching client the other day. Like, you don't know what's on the other side of working on a big project right now, and I'm like, you don't know what's on the other side. You have to go through this trough of despair, the most emotional cycle of
Mm-hmm.
change. You've got to journey through the trough of despair. And if you want to quit now, you're going to go back to the beginning, and you're going to have to figure this. You're going to learn the
Yep.
lesson one way or another. So just stick through it. It's going to be worth it, and you'll have a different perspective on the other side.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
That's absolutely remarkable. I have some good friends, and they do business. They actually have a brand doing business as a couple, and they support other couples in doing business as a couple because
Yep.
that wasn't what they wanted. They didn't set out to do that, and then the pandemic happened, and they're like, let's do business together. I'm definitely dumbing it down, but it's nuanced. My husband and I are talking only now, about collaborating, and he's going to come into my investment company, and that's a whole. But it's been years of, no, let's not do this. I like being married to you. Let's not go down that
Yeah,
road.
I mean, I often say that marriage is difficult, but partnerships are even more difficult, because at the end of the day, with a marriage, well, hopefully your marriage is strong enough that you're going to get through it. You're willing to put in that effort at the end of the day, because the family is the most important. But with a partnership, it's really easy to say this isn't working and just want to give up and move on. And so partnerships, in my mind, are a lot more difficult than a marriage. And then when you do the two together, well, then it gets really, really tough.
Get into some sticky territory. I could
Yeah.
park on this topic for quite some time because I think that this serves people well. I think even when we're not necessarily in business together, um, we're going through things. I mean, if we're committed to our marriages, we're going through different evolutions and stages of it, and just hearing other people finding their successes is always encouraging. And I love it when couples stick through the uncomfortable times because there's such a reward on the other end. You and I know that because we've been married
Yep.
for 16 and 18 years. It's like, man, it's totally worth it.
Yep. And here's the other thing. I think the other difficult part of working with your spouse is we know as entrepreneurs that what we do is a 24/7, 365-day thing. It's not working a job where you go in 9 to 5, you come home and you shut it off and you focus on family. It will absorb your entire life. And when it's just one of you that's doing it, the other person can say, hey, you need to shut it off. You need to leave the work mind space right now, and you need to be in the family mind space. And so it's nice to have somebody that can say that. When you're partners with your spouse, it's a lot more difficult because at any given time, one of you is probably thinking about work and the other one doesn't want to pull them out because it's like, yeah, now I have to think about that too. And you end up spending 24/7, 365 thinking about work and not focusing enough on the family. And so one of the really important things to do if you're going to work with your spouse is you really have to set boundaries and you really have to say, hey, 6 o'clock at night, phone goes off. We talk about family. We don't talk about work stuff. Weekends, we're taking Saturday off, or maybe Saturday and Sunday if you're lucky, and we're not talking about work. We're just going to focus on the family. And you really have to force that because if you don't, and we fell into this pattern the first couple years as well, that it will be work 24/7, and that's not good for anybody in the family. If you have kids, for the spouses, for the parents, I mean, you're going to literally be absorbed and you're not going to have a life outside of your business.
This is so true, and it's even in your own business. Even for me in my own business, I love everything I do so much that
Yep.
it's a hobby, it's an obsession, it checks so many boxes of contribution, obsession, hobby,
Yep.
income, all of that, that it's like it's a happy spot to be. And
Yep.
it's so easy to find myself driving in the car and not being present. It's like, wait, Jules, like, step out of your mind, be
Yep.
present with your kids. And I have to say that aloud to them. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm lost in thought over here, but you're here and I want to talk. Like,
Yep.
wow, yeah, it happens. I'm going to shift gears. Total 180. Here we go from doing the heartfelt things. The way you talk about economics and the way you understand and interpret, the marketplace is absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion. And so I love hearing and I love listening. Conscious Investor, you're going to go when you're done watching watching or listening, head on over, make sure you subscribe and follow the Drunk Real Estate podcast because it's so much fun listening to you guys talk, and it's also deeply informative. And so, and hearing such brilliant, like, you guys are all such strong thinkers. It's fun, it's lighthearted, but you guys know how to get deep. And I love how you talk about what's happening in the economy. I just love to, like, I hear a lot of people saying, well, interest rates are going to go down. And I don't really like to get so lost in the interest rate conversation because it's
Yep.
just one toggle. But I would just love to say, like, love to invite you to say, what are some of the most exciting things you're noticing in the economy right now?
So interest rates will go down, and then they'll go back up again, and they'll go down again, and they'll go up again. And I think that's the takeaway that people need to realize, that everybody's so focused on the short term. What's going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? When I think, well, it's definitely important. We have to be focused on the short term, especially if we have investors, we have investments. We need to manage those investments short term. But before we think long term, we have to start by looking at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the economy runs in cycles. And the economy has always run in cycles. I mean, we've had 35 recessions over the last 150 years, 160 years. And so if you divide 160 years by 35 recessions, that's a recession every 4 or 5 years. And so if we're going to have a recession every 4 or 5 years, and I know it's been a really long time since 2008, we had the longest market expansion in history. But the reality is, for anybody that's old like I am, you remember that before 2008, we had recessions every few years. And so there are going to be times where interest rates are high, and interest rates tend to be high before recessions. And then we're going to head into a down period, and everything's going to suck, and it's going to feel horrible, and it's going to feel like everything we've worked so hard for is going away. And then 18 months later, 24 months later, we're going to get into that next economic expansion, and everything's going to be great again, and life's going to be wonderful. And we have to get used to these cycles. And so for anybody out there that's like thinking, well, where's the market headed? What's going to happen in the next 3 months or 6 months or 12 months? Yes, that's important. But keep in mind that regardless of what happens in the next 3 or 6 months, in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, things are going to be completely different. And then in 10 years, they're going to be different again. And we're going to keep going through those cycles. So whenever things seem bad, don't get hung up on it, because they'll get better. Whenever things seem good, don't get overconfident, because they will get worse. And so where we are right now is it's weird. We're in a very weird part of the economic cycle. And I would even say that in my lifetime, and I'm in my early 50s, I don't remember a time that it was anything like this. And I know, talking to some people, maybe the 80s were like this, where we saw periods of high inflation, but not necessarily a strong economy. So maybe we're going back to the 80s here before like we've seen what we're seeing. But I think that we're likely in for a softening in the economy. We've definitely seen that over the last month or two. We've seen inflation come down. We've seen retail sales numbers start to come down. We've seen prices for wholesale goods come down, so businesses are buying things cheaper. Business confidence is coming down. Everything's kind of pointing towards a softening in inflation. But it's likely going to lead also to a softening of the economy. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 6 to 12 months we see a recession. But I think this will be good, because I think we do need a reset in the economy. Right now, I think people are in a lot of debt. Obviously, real estate prices are super high. There's a lot of things that a reset, it might be bad for some people, but I think for the overall economy would be a good thing. And so I'm kind of, I don't expect there to be a lot of great news over the next year or two, but I don't think it's going to be that bad either. I don't think we're heading towards a 2008 type event. But long story short, what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years with asset prices going through the roof, what we've seen the last 10 or 12 years with multifamily doing great, and single family doing great, and all of their assets doing great, I think that could slow down as well. So I think we're getting back to the normal cycles, and we may see a recession here for the first time since 2008.
Think it'd be refreshing as well.
Yeah.
I think the recessions, it's just a natural like cleansing that needs to take place to kind of recalibrate everything, to reground what is taking place in the marketplace. We see the prices, we see everything just kind of sigh. It's like a sigh of like,
Yeah.
thank you. Because when I think about growing, and like if you and I, we went out and we were running, and someone said, no, just keep running. Like, and they keep moving the goalposts. No, you're going to run further. You're going to run further. Wait, whoa,
Yep.
whoa, whoa. We'd be exhausted. And I know that the economy isn't a physical being, but I feel like it just gets exhausted. And it's like, can we just stop and just like catch our breath here?
Yeah, and the what that tiredness is, what the analogy is in the economic world, is debt. So what we're seeing when we have good economic times, generally we have low interest rates. Businesses are doing well, so they want to expand, they want to hire more people, they want to buy more equipment, they want to buy more factories, they want to buy more inventory. That all takes money, so they borrow lots of money, and they do it at low interest rates. And so everybody's taking on debt. People are taking on debt personally. Businesses are taking on debt. Debt's just being created out of thin air, and then things start to slow down. And when things start to slow down, and things are actually, they overheat before they slow down. They overheat. The Fed says, okay, things are overheating. There's too much demand. People are spending too much money. Things are too good. It's causing inflation. we have to raise interest rates to stop the inflation. And so once they raise interest rates, well, everything starts to slow down. And now suddenly interest rates are higher, so it's harder to get debt. Floating rate debt that we had is now cost more because interest rates have gone up on the debt that we had. And suddenly people can't pay their debt anymore. And so debt becomes so burdensome that that's what causes the recession. But the nice thing about a recession is exactly what you said, is it's a cleansing. And by cleansing, what I mean is it's a cleansing of debt. So businesses go bankrupt, people go into foreclosure, people have to declare bankruptcy, and credit card companies take big hits. And it's not a good thing, but it's a necessary thing for the economy. We need that cleansing. We need that debt to go away so we can start over and head into the next cycle.
It's absolutely imperative. Are there any markers that like? I mean, I just feel like you're in the weeds, like of all of this, and you have such an understanding of it. What are some of those like markers that you look for as like almost like KPIs of sorts with the economy? Everyone has almost like,
Yeah.
Conscious investor, you might prefer to look at cash on cash, but another conscious investor might like to look at the IRR, and so like everybody has their nuances that they're looking for. So what are Jay Scott's nuances of looking at the economy? Your lovers.
Yeah, there are a few things that, and I'm not going to take credit for any of these. These are things that have been tried and tested by economists throughout the decades. And what we found are there are a few very reliable leading indicators of recession. So number one, and no surprise to anybody, is just GDP numbers. So basically, GDP, gross domestic product, is the total output of the economy, how much money is moving through the economy. And as that tends to trend downwards, as the economy starts to slow down and maybe even shrink, if we get negative GDP, that's the first sign of recession. In fact, for a lot of people, that's the definition of recession. And what we've seen over the last several quarters is that GDP has started to slow down. We've been over 2% for much of the last few years, 2% growth per year. In the last quarter, we saw growth at 1.3%.